An amazing product or an amazing technology or cool technology doesn't necessarily mean commercial success. Customer centricity is an absolute must.
You can't build a perfect product. There's no such thing as a perfect product. Everyone to some degree has something that can be improved. If you're so focused on having a perfect product, you're not going to make progress quickly, right?
You know what? Apart from the data and the systems that I'm reading, at the end of the day, software is software, tech is tech, but let's not forget that the actual humans that go there and spend 8, 10, 12 hours of the day, what are the emotions that they're going through?
The best performing teams ask questions. Do not just sit there and get told what to do. Now, it's not that they do their own thing, that's not the point, but they ask questions. Like, they want to know why we're doing something.
People are like, oh, you got technical debt? You must have done something wrong. Absolutely not. Technical debt is just a common denominator across everything you do.
Andreas Marmaras is the General Manager of Technology and Product at Domain, bringing a wealth of global experience in scaling businesses, driving mergers and acquisitions, and leading organizational transformations. With roles such as Chief Product Officer at Different, where he achieved 4 times growth in a year, and Chief Product and Technology Officer at Shipit during its hypergrowth phase, Andreas has proven expertise in accelerating company success. His background spans markets in the US, UK, and Australia. Join us for our conversation with Andreas Marmaras.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Andreas. It's great to have you on. Excited to jump into our discussion. Been organising this one for a while, and excited to jump into the product discussion and get your insight. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So for those that may not know your career to date and what you're doing now, just give us a bit of a short background about your career and how you've got to where you are today.
Perfect. So I'm the general manager of product and tech for Domain Insight right now. Essentially, Domain Insight is the division that leverages and commercializes all the data that flows through the domain ecosystem, through consumers, agents, banking institutions, government, and whatnot. And looking back for the past maybe 20 plus years, I've been in the product, tech, and data arena in various countries and stages. I've started my career by working in very big international companies. Then I worked my way, I guess, downwards into startups and scale-ups, and now I'm a Domain, which is a mid-level, let's say, enterprise, but Domain Insight, where I lead these functions that I mentioned before, is more of a scale-up within the company. So I guess I'm a pretty varied background across geographies and industries. And I haven't really nailed or I haven't really honed into one industry, but I have a bit of a breadth across the board.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and you definitely do have a fair bit of experience across those industries and geographies as well. And I just wanted to probably dive straight into it. What do you feel is the key to success for product teams? I know it's not necessarily a easy answer or just a silver bullet as such, but what do you feel around product teams and products in general? What do you feel is the biggest thing to getting that success?
Yeah, look, I think it all starts and ends with relentless customer centricity. I've seen it time and time again where an amazing product or an amazing technology or cool technology doesn't necessarily mean commercial success. And when it's no commercial success, is a self-fulfilling health prophecy. You don't have the ammunition to continue to build amazing products. So I would say that customer centricity is an absolute must. Commercial acumen, and never lose sight of the problems that you started solving, especially as you search and find product market fit, right? It's very easy to lose sight of what brought you, what made you into the company and the organization that you are. So I would say this is the most important thing. Think of product managers as agents of translating and bringing this customer centricity and evangelizing it internally and externally. So I would say this is the absolute must that you need to maintain across the journey.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think from my perspective as well, and just experience of seeing so many people focus on features over outcomes and aren't talking to customers. I know one of your personal experiences, I believe it was with Shipit, but where you were talking about getting onto the actual factory floor, but seeing and observing how people were doing things and the difference between that and just kind of what we were talking about in the boardroom, let's say with personas and all of this stuff, which is great. It's not wrong to do that, obviously, but it's like really the gold is observing and truly, I guess, embedding ourselves in what customers are doing and customers' pain points, etc. And to me anyway, so many people talk about this stuff and it's all theory. Very few people actually genuinely understand, their customers. And especially I find this personally anyway with tech, with people in product, even engineers and designers, whatever. When it comes to more practical things, right? So you talk about getting on the warehouse floor and things like that. There is that a lot of them have never had that level of experience, right? And it's then when you think about it, it sounds so obvious. You're like, yeah, well, okay, how are you going to build a product for someone that you have that? So I don't know. I'd love for you to unpack that a bit more.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree with everything. It's funny as you grow in seniority, and I saw it in myself. Right, I was much more connected to the actual users and customers, and then you start becoming more senior. You start decoupling and abstracting yourself, and you end up, as you said, in between leadership courses and slides and boardrooms and presentations, and it's just so easy to lose sight of what is the actual mission and purpose that we're all in here together, that we're paying each other ample salaries to solve pervasive problems. So I'm always encouraging people to go back to the basics, deeply empathize and understand your customers. It's easier said than done, but in order to go with a compelling proposition and build the right thing and sell it the right way, you truly need to understand their job better than them, if you can, or their problems better than them. And there's multiple ways and techniques to go about it. And I always talk to my teams about just get out there. By theorizing about personas and use cases and jobs to be done, it will get you to a point, and all these frameworks are there for a reason, to create systems and kind of guardrails of why we do what we do. But just if you need to go to the factory floor, if you need to go and observe how the parcels are being orchestrated, or how things are being moved along with the couriers in the ship it example, it's just so powerful. It gives you just a very direct and immediate perspective onto, what, apart from the data and the systems that I'm reading, the actual humans that go there and spend 8, 10, 12 hours of their day, what are the emotions that they're going through? At the end of the day, software is software, tech is tech, but let's not forget that humans are the ones that are building the technology, and humans are the ones that are buying the technology, and the emotions and empathy that needs to go into all that.
Yeah, 100% agree. And often I'll meet engineers or designers on teams or whatever that will work. They have no idea what they know what they're building, right? Don't get me wrong, but like they don't know who they're building it for. They can try and give you some answer. And what is most interesting, I find, if you ask individuals working on a project, they'll all give you a different answer. Right. And it's like, okay, well, truly, what are we trying to do here? And then the other point, coming back to what we discussed earlier as well, is kind of focusing on features rather than outcomes. Is like, okay, we're like, oh, let's add this feature to the backlog, or let's do this, or let's do that. And it's like some cool idea that we've come up with, but we come up with it, right? Like, and we release it and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, no one's using it. Right. So what do you say on that front with like just prioritizing? So obviously about understanding the customers, but then prioritizing the product for impact and I guess return, rather than just delivering a whole heap of features.
It's very interesting. One of the most brutal moments that I have been through in my career, and I subsequently started to use these lessons in my own teams, is when it comes to product managers. Usually they're curious, innovative, creative human beings, analytical human beings. And sometimes they come to me and they will say, I have this amazing idea. We can do such and such. And my brutal answer to them is, no one, like, your idea doesn't matter. Like, you need to go and validate and check it and test it. If you have an amazing idea, we all have amazing ideas. They're kind of irrelevant sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, the relevance has to be tested and justified with the actual users and customers. And again, there's multiple ways and stages on how you do this. But if you do a hackathon in a company, or you go and collate all the different ideas from engineers, product managers, designers, and customer support and whatnot, you will usually end up with 100 or 200, cool things to do. The reality is you won't be able to do only even 5 or 10 of these, right? So um, it's a brutal lesson for product managers in particular, that it doesn't really matter what you think. It's all about how you can validate and test what matters commercially, for the problems that you're trying to solve, and essentially what customers have to tell you. I've seen product managers come to me almost in tears saying that I had this amazing idea, we built this, and we went to the customers and they hated it. And I was like, that's great. Knowing that these customers hate this, so early on in the process, it's a blessing. It saved you, months of effort and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of development. So they take it so personally. It's like, oh my God, my idea wasn't liked. That's not about that. It's all about validating and testing cheaply, quickly, and effectively.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just on that specific point is, it's so much. I don't like the word cheap. I don't think is the right way to do it, but it's a lot lower cost, or I guess it is cheaper to do the research, and to even if you're going to go into like low fidelity wireframing or something like that, they're like just rapid ideate, right? Like rapidly ideate these ideas, get them to the customers, thrash them out. The good ones, we never have good ideas like the first time around. What I mean is, like, they're never finished ideas. So like you get it there, we thrash it out, and maybe only 5% actually make it through. And that's good, right? As you say, like, we've just saved hundreds of thousands in development, wasted time, mental energy, everything else. Like the point of it is, and often do this when we're working with clients as well, because clients will come to us, where obviously you're working in a product, it's different to what we do, but it's the same kind of idea. But clients coming to us saying, oh, this is what we want to do. We want to build this, we want to build that. And it's like, great, why? And they don't really have an answer. It's like, oh yeah, well, because we want to build it. And the thing I always come back to on it around the product side is, why are we doing what are we doing, and what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to take it from, for example, one of them with us is like, one recently was, okay, their sales process, their quoting process was quite complex. It was taking them 2 weeks, 2-week turnaround time. And it's like, okay, the outcome is to get that down to 15 minutes, right? So we need to build a system to do that. That is a much more specific, I guess, thing that we can focus on, and a much more clear objective for us as a team to go, okay, now we know what we're doing, right? We're not just building a proposal generator, right? Like, or something like that. We are actually, the whole outcome is, okay, we need to take our turnaround time 2 weeks down to 15 minutes. Now let's explore how we best do that.
Yeah. Look, just the last point here I want to make is, I have a term for this usually, not this particular instance, but what I see happen frequently with engineers, data scientists, designers, it's what I call a CV-driven development, when, a lot of the time teams just find a cool idea or a cool new tech, and it's like, oh, let's just go build, visual LLMs on floor plans, or Gen AI the hell out of everything. And I'm like, guys, sure, but in the end of the day, you got to come back and justify exactly what you're doing, what the outcomes you're trying to strive, and point to me the customers that you spoke to, and why you feel this would drive the right outcome. So, and it's a hard thing. The more junior you are, there's a little bit of romanticism. Don't get me wrong, I still love what I do, and I love building products, but I think when we're a little bit earlier in our career, we're a little bit more romantic about all the amazing, greenfield stuff we're going to do. And then reality is, you just got to be relentlessly focused on the problems at hand.
Yeah, I totally agree. I call it like, shiny object, right? You're chasing the shiny object. Like, it's just like, oh, cool, let's go do this. And I'm guilty of it myself, right? I love, especially when you're in tech, like, you love saying, okay, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. But it's about, you've got to pull yourself back and go, okay, how is this actually going to have impact on the business? Is it going to impact EBITDA? Is it going to help us get towards our growth? Now, obviously, there's other initiatives with things that are happening. Not all product is about necessarily improving EBITDA and getting return, but the reality is the majority of it is, right? Like, that's the facts. If you're going to stay in business, well, that's just how you've got to stay in business. You've got to turn a profit. And so the majority of that work, and with us, it's exclusively with us. That's the work that we do. But essentially, I guess one thing I wanted to unpack with that, what have you seen? You've obviously worked across different kind of markets and that. Like, have you seen any shift in like how product is, or any noticeable things across kind of different areas that you've worked in that are any different, or is it pretty consistent, globally from what you've seen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's actually quite inconsistent, if I'm honest with you.
Okay.
And I think what we're observing is a couple of things. I think the different time horizons of how industries evolved, and also the way we do things and the talent we have in different markets is usually the product or the outcome of the companies that nurtured them, right? And let me make this a bit more clear. In the US, for example, um, Silicon Valley and whatnot, we've been doing they've been doing SaaS for decades, right? They know
Yeah.
how to build amazing SaaS experiences, B2C, B2B across the board. And these companies that evolved through the decades created generations and generations of amazing professionals that have done this at scale time and time again. Now I come to Australia and I've worked in London and New York and Nashville and Los Angeles and in various places. And I've led teams across the board. And we can talk more about that if you wish. But what I've found coming to Australia is that the talent pool here hasn't been nurtured in a true product craft, in a true product sense. A lot of them have been account managers in disguise. A lot of them have been people that
Yeah.
to configure bigger platforms like SAP and Salesforce. And don't get me wrong, the talent pool is amazing. The brains are fantastic. The raw ingredients are there, but they just haven't been trained the right way to build scale or B2B enterprise software at scale. And equally, I think the leaders that I've met here, some of them are phenomenal and they really helped me through my journey in my career. But a lot of the mid-level product and tech leaders, again, they've been nurtured by banks or other organizations they're not necessarily tech and product first. And that had an impact on the industry. Now, don't get me wrong, over the past 5 to 10 years, I think this has shifted a lot and we've caught up a lot and the caliber has increased. But yeah, the techniques, the talent pool, the methodologies and how we go about building things is really the product of how we evolved through the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. And with your experience there, then, like, what are some of the challenges you've come up against with leading those teams? I guess obviously in Australia here, as you said, you're trying to nurture that and grow that talent to be, I suppose, an easier way to put it is just to become more on a global international standard, I guess, right? To get it improve, and obviously that's not a blanket statement because there's some brilliant people everywhere. But I agree in general, just with everything we are behind, especially someone like the USA, right? They're very much more mature than we are in regards to their with Silicon Valley and everything else in regards to their companies, right? Which is obvious, but we can learn from that and we can learn quickly. But how have you found, teams? How do you get the best out of your teams that you work with? Like, what are some of the key areas you focus on?
Look, in terms of my overarching philosophy, I would say I abide by a couple of things. I'm always very fair, and that fairness translates into both positive feedback and reinforcement loops when team are doing really well, but equally when things are not happening the way I see fit or the way I believe is the right way. I'm pretty quick and fair with my constructive feedback early on. I also try to base everything a lot on insight and data, right? I'm a data nerd deep inside, but also I always believe insights over opinions. So again, when it comes to decisions, to how we grow the company, how we manage and kind of grow our people, I always take an insight-driven approach and a more structured and systematic approach, if you wish. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect all the time. But when it comes to career development, for example, I try to, through the years, I've developed different frameworks and databases of all the people I've interacted with in product and tech, and I have certain profiles of how I think people should be performing in certain levels, and I can break it down into 70 or 80 different characteristics. So, for example, when I go to my product team, we go and do a self-assessment or a calibration, and we take a very systematic approach on this is your profile, this is where I think you fit in the frame and your career ladder. If you have gaps in XYZ, the first question is, what sort of flavor of engineer or product manager do you want to be? We have more commercial ones, more technical ones, more kind of marketing focused ones. And then when we kind of frame the career framework and the career ladder for the individual, then again, we take a more data-driven approach, and here are the gaps. Let's aim at 6-month or 12-month intervals to start bridging these gaps by different techniques such as mentorship, training, shadowing, cutting the teeth into areas where they don't. So to close the loop into your question, I believe in fairness. I believe in insights over opinions. I'm very passionate about continuous improvement as a human, as a team, as an organization. I don't know. It's how I operate as a human. I think if a month goes by and I don't feel like that I've improved on something, I feel that's a month wasted.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go from 0 to 100, but let's all thrive to be a little bit better at what we do than the last year or the last month, the last period. And the last thing I will say, I'm not a hippie person where it's like all kumbaya and all happiness and loves, but I always try to explain to the teams, don't take yourselves too seriously. In the end of the day, we spend so much time together. Let's have a laugh along the way, and let's support and be empathetic to each other. And yeah, just collaboration and support, super important. When things go well, everybody's happy and feeling good with each other. But when things go wrong, is that fabric of empathy and collaboration across the team that will get you out of the tough situation, I believe.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And kind of maintaining positivity through that, and it's a lesson that I've learned myself as well, to try and maintain that positivity, whether it doesn't just apply to product, it's business in general and life in general, right? When there's challenges, it's easy to get down about it, but can we see it as an opportunity for improvement? Can we see it as an opportunity for growth? And how do we, I guess, when your back's against the wall, how do you turn it into a learning lesson and an opportunity that grows you rather than crushes you? Coming back to earlier when we're talking about kind of the outcomes, and I call it, well, it gets called around, it's not my term, but the North Star, you'd be familiar with it as well. But I think it's a super important that product teams, that teams in general are aligned on, okay, what are we doing here, right? What are we actually working towards? And it's not something like we're making the button red, right? Now, I'm using an extreme example there, but like, what are we actually trying to achieve, right? Like, where are we going this, and what business impact can we have with this? And this is why I think it's so important, is I do see a disconnect between this kind of product and tech in general to overall business. Now, where if you're a SaaS company, your tech is your product, is your business, I guess. But outside of that, there is companies that operate more traditionally that also are layering on this tech as well now, that is a component of their business. But I do see some disconnect and challenges with that tech part, proving and demonstrating the business value that they're bringing. And most of the time, if I'm going to be brutally honest, is because there's no clear alignment across, the stakeholders or the entire team as to, well, this is the outcome we're working towards, and here's measurable impact that we're having towards that, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing, I go a lot of the times as I progress in my career, I go back to that CEO. I had the CEO in an American-based CEO, and he told me a thing that kind of stuck with me. And that thing was, he came to me once, and we were talking about misalignments and whatnot, and he told me, Andreas, we're all friends as long as we have the same goals, right? And I think this is where it all starts and ends. And I'll be to explain this a little bit more. What creates friction and tension in any organization or any team is misalignment of motivation and misalignment of goals. And this sometimes it's explicit or implicit. The explicit one is in an instance, for example, when the sales teams or the customer facing teams have much shorter horizons of success than a product and tech team would have. Hey, you guys have 1, 2, 3 year ambition to achieve XYZ, build a sustainable product and tech, and you go after certain goals. And then if you look at the 3 year horizon, you break it down into all the things you need to do sustainably. And if a customer rep or a sales rep or BDM have a quarterly target or a monthly target they want to hit, it's obvious, right? We have a misalignment of optimization or indexing here. The first teams will make decisions that will thrive over the mid to long-term horizon, and other people will optimize for very short horizons. Equally within the teams, I think the way we need to hire and train and coach the engineering teams these days is with a lot of commercial focus. In the past few decades ago, I remember we had the commercial people and the technical people, and they were like two different beasts. And this just doesn't work anymore. Like the cross-functional nature of how we do things enforces, if you wish, that everybody have the pulse on why we're doing what we're doing, the commercial outcomes. And honestly, one of the litmus tests for me is in a company when I go and talk to the most junior engineer in the team, like someone straight out of uni, and ask them, hey, why are you doing this? And what outcome you're going to drive? And how does it help the company? If I go to three of them and get no answer or misaligned answers, then I know I have a problem. So to wrap it all up, common goals, consistent incentivization that drives outcomes that help the company. And I would say we're all in this together with the customer at the forefront and applying some sort of commercial rigor across the board, regardless of what your discipline is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the key things that I've seen with teams and the best team members from my perspective is the people that ask questions, right? So whether that's engineers, designers, whoever it is, product managers themselves, whoever it is, the best performing teams ask questions and ask for clarity and want to understand. And this comes back and touches every aspect what we were talking about earlier with understanding the customer and getting embedded in that. But like they're curious, right? Is the way to describe it. It's like high performing developers, and I'll just say this, do not just sit there and get told what to do. Now, it's not that they do their own thing. That's not the point, but they ask questions, like they want to know why we're doing something, and then they challenge it. Like if they've got a better idea, because then it's great. But like they understand, they know the business, right? They know the customer, they know what we're trying to achieve. Same thing, not just engineers or developers or designers or whoever, but it's like, okay, what about this way? Or, okay, can you explain to me why that's so important? Or this is why, it makes sense now. So they go away with that context. But the worst performing teams, on the other hand, are the teams that say, okay, yeah, well, no worries, we'll go and do that. Right? Like, that's it. And then they come back with something like, here's what I've done. It's like, oh, that's not the right thing. Oh, well, you didn't tell me that. It's like, but you didn't ask any questions, right? Like, we had explained, we didn't know you didn't know, if that makes sense, right? So, and it's not just like any one individual's fault, because at the end of the day, there's responsibility on everyone for the communication. But I just think to simplify it, the highest performing teams are the ones constantly asking questions, constantly curious, right?
I love this, Julian. I think curiosity is a massive driving force. And to be fair, naturally curious people are the ones that would drive you forward, but also they're uncomfortable sometimes. Even in my team, like if I have sometimes, honestly, I have a board meeting and I know I have to do something and I have a tight timeline or a deadline, and I go down to my teams and I have to say, hey, look, this is the context, this is why we got to do this. And people will turn around, but why? But why? But why? And while it makes you uncomfortable in the moment, sometimes you just can't cut through. It's that driving force of understanding the context, the motivation, the incentivization behind the decisions that will give you, essentially creates a framework for removing bias from your decisions and making sure the justification is consistent. The other thing I will mention quickly is you're probably familiar with a T-shaped, individuals, professionals when it comes to agile. I think the crafts have evolved. I think product, tech, data science, design, they've all come closer together, and you just can't hide in a corner and code or just, do wireframes or build UX experiences. I think you need to have interchangeable skills and be able to empathize and understand the others. And I see this very clearly these days in teams where, someone is sick for a couple of days. I have instances where engineers stepped up to product manage. I had instances where product managers, went down on Figma and started crafting designs. And I love this. I love the fact that, look, this is not about, moving my cheese or, doing my job, but it's all about, a common core of empathy, cross-functional skills, and driving together with a common mission, understanding each other and why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And just again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's just so important that like those teams are curious. Doesn't matter who you are. You know how to learning to learn, right? You are a quick learner, and absolutely agree. It's not about being a UX designer, a UX researcher, an engineer, a product manager, all of these things. That's not the point, but you have an understanding of it. We can answer why. Like, you don't have to tell me specifically this engineering problem and how I definitely have to solve it, but you can tell me I know it's a problem, because if it doesn't get fixed, well, it's going to cause scalability issues, right? Like, as a designer, if you can't say that, or vice versa as an engineer, if you can't look something and go, that's a UX problem, I don't necessarily know how to fix it, but I can understand why it's a problem, right? I get that. Then, yeah, there's fundamental misalignment. There's going to be issues. You're never going to outperform a team that is that curious and is that, that invested in it. And I'll kind of getting onto that on the one that around the engineering side. I know you've been involved in products that have scaled pretty quickly and stuff, and I wanted to get your thoughts on like technical debt as well, and how this plays part in product management or product as a whole. And in my experience and how we've seen it is, we're typically working with executives or stakeholders that aren't very technical at all and can't grasp the concept of technical debt. Now we can simplify it, we break it down, and they understand it, but it is something that obviously needs to be managed. But when you're scaling and you're growing, it's easy to ignore it, right?
Look, technical debt is an interesting one. I think it's fairly misunderstood force or concept out there, and people are like, oh, you got technical debt, you must have done something wrong. Absolutely not. Like, technical debt is just a common denominator across everything you do. And sometimes I've been interviewing people, and they would ask me in interviews, oh, what's your level of technical debt? And I'll be like, I think some of the people out there are imagining a world where it doesn't exist, or everything is perfect and everything is fitted together in these perfect little modular boxes, and we're happily ever after. I think it's a misconception, right? So everybody has technical debt, product debt, design debt, even pricing debt and contract debt, right? Let's not go there, because it's it's a lot of stories there. But I think the reality is you got to learn to live with it, manage it, and also be very deliberate of the decisions you make when you accumulate it. What I mean by that is there are points in time in the life cycle of a company or a startup and a scale up, essentially, that you will make conscious decisions of accumulating debt, in indexing for revenue, ARR growth, customer growth, whatever that is. I think the most important thing is education, making the right decisions with the right reasoning behind it, and just do not forget the decisions you made. I've seen CEOs and founders who are like, look, we're going to index for this quick win, but 6 months down the line, we have to go back and address, what we've left. And obviously 6 months down the line, everybody's like, what do you mean? Like, we have no people to do that. And so I think being explicit with your communication, being explicit with what you're moving, what you kind of postpone for later, and then holding each other accountable with a proverbial contract or agreement of, we can index, we can, cut some corners, let's say, for a period, but you know how it works. You've been in the game, Julian. Like, the moment you start uncontrolled accumulation, then it becomes exponentially tougher. And honestly, 2 to 3 years down the line, you're in for a massive replatforming or transformation that will be months or even years of your engineering team. And we're talking costs in the millions or the tens of millions for larger organizations. So again, deliberate management, deliberate decisions. It's okay to let things go for a while, as long as you have a strategy to index and optimize for fixing it down the road.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that as well. And I think there's a balance to it, right? Like, technical debt is a thing, but it needs to be managed, just like financial debt. It's like any debt, like, right? It can be healthy or used to your advantage to a degree, or it can be severely unhealthy, right? If it's just left unmanaged and it's out of hand. And I totally agree with you, right? You cannot, well, for some people probably argue you can, but you can't build a perfect product. There's no such thing as a perfect product, right? Like, everyone to some degree has something that can be improved. And I would argue on the other extreme that if you're so focused on having a perfect product, you're not going to make progress quickly, right? Which is like, okay, that's why it's a trade-off, right? There's no right answer to it, but it's like, we want to be making those, I guess I like the way you put it, like those critical decisions though along the way. We want to be making sure we're, with the best of our ability, we're making those decisions right to limit our problems down the track, right? Because we don't want to be rushing something, a large decision, an architecture decision, and we in 6 months, 12 months time, we're like, we should have done something different here, right? Now, there may be those scenarios. That's not to say that that's not going to be the case, but ideally, we would do our best to try and avoid those things and manage them. But I like the way you put it.
You're spot on. You're spot on. And just being a little bit more specific and explicit, I think what scale-ups and startups can do is identify their one or two critical paths when it comes to scalability, revenue, and whatnot. As you said, there's no notion of a perfectly built technology or product, because also time is brutal with technology. Like you made perfect architectural decisions 2 years down the line, it's like new libraries, new frameworks, new technologies. So what I encourage people to do is just be as modular and as decoupled with your architecture in these critical paths, so you can very quickly course correct down the line. Also, if you try to optimize for a perfect product, you probably overcooked it, and you probably spend a little bit more time than you should. I have debates with architects and principal engineers about, look, we're on X volume, and if we do this replatforming, it will allow for 20X volume. And I'm like, this is probably not going to happen for like 10 years, right? So let's just optimize for 3X the volume or 5X the volume, and 2-3 years down the line we'll revisit. But as I mentioned, modularity of essentially no decision that creates entrenchment into one path that you can't get out of, with technologies, with libraries, with the way products fit together is super important.
Yeah, I totally agree. How do you? I'd love to get your experience on this here, but how do you align like executive stakeholders, and getting them to, especially those that, I don't know what your experience is with those that aren't as technical. Like, I'm not saying they don't understand anything, right? But my point is, it is hard, right, to understand the details, every single detail, especially when you start talking architecture and all of these other things, these decisions. But what approaches do you use to get on the same page and align yourselves with leadership?
Yeah, I've had an interesting journey with this type of projects and decisions, and I think I operate from a position of relative advantage because I am technically trained, but I spend a lot of time with commercial teams, business stakeholders, boards, and whatnot. So for me, it's fairly natural to bridge the gap. And to explain this further, what I've seen technical teams fail in the past is they present their cases for addressing debt or replatforming or refactoring or rebuilding with a fair bit of emotion and frustration. And it's just an ETL. There's a transformation layer in the language you use from a technical team to an executive team to a board that just sometimes doesn't happen. In the end of the day, there's techniques to quantify what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if you're unable to do it, maybe there's a flaw in what you're doing. So, for instance, I was in various startups, and people would come to me and say, "Hey, we're operating on a very old version of Ruby on Rails. We can't hire people. Engineers are frustrated. We can't do X, Y, Z." And they would go directly to the founders or the CEO before I joined, and would be like, "But we're getting shut down all the time." And I'm like, "You're getting shut down because you don't speak the right language. The language is inability to hire or losing IP and talent will cost us X over Y months. Inability to not be able to scale key components of our architecture will cost us X in revenue or customers that we're not able to onboard. Or if you model retention issues that will happen through the course of not being able to serve our SLAs, this is how you model it financially and go back into what it means for the business for now, for the 3 years." And I think where it's more natural to me is because I have this financial and data acumen as well. So I know tech a fair bit, I know product a fair bit, and I can model financially. So it's easier for me to put a business case together and go and say, this is not me being upset or my tech teams being frustrated or want like a perfect environment. It's all about viability for the business for the few years. And CFOs really fall for this. If you talk numbers, they fall for this. CFOs fall, then CEOs follow.
No, I agree. I think I've been lucky enough to have a lot of practical experience as well within business, and also just in the kind of industries that we work in with manufacturing and kind of wholesale and industrial services, but practical experience, which it is. There's very few people that have, I would say, a good cross section between tech and business, not just in practical with actually how the business runs, but then also at leadership level and bridging the gap. But most importantly, translating, okay, what do we want to do as a business to, okay, what can we technically do? But then versus, okay, technically this is what we can do back into the business and why it makes sense. And I agree with you. It's a challenge, but it's about breaking it down into their language. And so often, I even find myself doing this, but you'll talk to someone that isn't as technically minded, and you're like, hey, slow down a bit, because we just take it for granted that they'll keep up with even smaller things, or, acronyms, and it's like, okay, just back this up. Let's simplify it, and just a practical example, I try and use analogies as really simple analogies, just to try and make it make sense, where they go, okay, because then you're building that trust, right? And it's like, okay, well, now it's made it make sense versus before I didn't really understand it. And to be fair, as a human, if we don't understand something, we fear it, right? Like at the end of the day, you fear the worst. It's like, oh, well, I don't understand it. I can't make a decision here. I feel a bit out of my depth. So I agree. It's super important that we speak that language and get on the same page with those executives. Well, I appreciate the discussion. I think it's been a great chat so far. I do have a finale segment where I ask the same three questions to each guest I'd like to get into. But before that, is there any kind of final comments or anything that you feel that we haven't touched off on that you would like to?
No, thank you. It's been an amazing chat, and always fantastic to stem from your experience and give examples and offer a little bit back. I would say that no company, no team, even individuals are unique and imperfect, and we all are. We're all very biased from our experiences and what made us into who we are. So I would say being open-minded with these things, continuously learning, and there's a ton of frameworks and precedents and experiences to learn out there, but I would say always apply some healthy skepticism and criticism in regards to, is this truly applicable to my case, to my company? Because what I often find is nothing fits perfectly out of the box. So I think tailoring the way you do things and learning from your biases and your experiences, but I guess applying the lens of, what about now? Does this fit my current situation? Is super important. And I say this because as I get older and more senior and more experienced, it's easy to get stuck into, no, but I've done this before and it worked for me. And you get this bias of, because it happened once in a certain scenario, it will happen again. I think this is important for leaders. Back to our conversation and tying everything together. Keep learning. Technologies change, companies change, commercial models change. So what worked for you in the past doesn't not necessarily mean it will be perfect for the future.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So yeah, the first question in the finale is what's one thing you believe businesses are not paying enough attention to right now that will be critical in the next 5 years?
Interesting. Macroeconomics, I think. Judging from the surprise that we had with a drastic inflation rate spike, and how companies were not as prepared, or they hadn't built the mitigation mechanisms to deal with it. So I would say macroeconomics and regulatory changes, again, sometimes they come across as vague, abstract concepts, and they don't hit us as imminently as we think. And when they do, we just haven't built muscles.
Yeah.
So a level of preparation and looking ahead is important. We're lucky at Domain because we have research and economic forecasting teams, so we're a little bit ahead in what's happening in our environment. But build some muscle on reacting quickly and effectively into the macro environment.
Very interesting. The second one is, what legacy do you want to leave in your industry? How do you hope your work will influence or shape the future?
Yeah, interesting. I love growing businesses. I love numbers. I love success. I love making money for the businesses that I work. But in the end of the day, I don't know, just looking at the people around me, evolving, people that I hired as, junior product managers, and looking at them becoming VPs and CPOs, it fills me with a lot of satisfaction and pleasure. So I want to be remembered or known for a person that is. I'm fairly demanding. I set the standard fairly high for the teams I work for, but hopefully everybody that's around me learns from me, and equally I learn from them, and I help them evolve on their journey. So it's a pretty humanistic approach. In the end of the day, we build companies, we work for companies, but this is a 1, 3, 5, 10-year horizon. At the end of the day, what stays are the relationships we built with the rest of the humans in the industry. So yeah, while I'm very pragmatic thinker and analytical and economical thinker, when it comes to the legacy, I take more of a human first approach, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the final one is, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
That's easy for me. Just be bloody patient. I've been so impatient, especially when I was younger. Everything had to happen quickly and furiously. And I made a lot of mistakes, man. I made a lot of mistakes, both in business and personal life, financial decisions. Just because I was like, yeah, I'm the top of the world. I can do this. I'm ambitious. But I sometimes I just didn't take the time to think things through. And I have amended a lot of it, I think, in the past 5 or 10 years. But yeah, patience and a bit more perseverance, I would say. There were cases in my time where I called it quits a bit too quickly, I would say, or I gave up on concepts or people, on companies. So yeah, a bit more patience, being more open-minded, and I think a bit more accepting. I remember how I was when I was younger. I wasn't as accepting with people that were very differing in opinions, right, around me. So now I've learned how to harvest this insight and kind of tailor my own personality. But back in the day, I remember I was always, oh yeah, this person is like very different to me and we don't agree. So kind of I look the other way. So yeah, these are the few things that I'm continuing to improve, I think.
Okay, very good. Appreciate the insight and the advice. It's very good. So, thanks again, Andreas, for coming on. It's been a great chat. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think we've touched off on a lot of topics. We could be here all day, but I think we've definitely touched off on a lot of things, which has been great. And you've given us a lot of great advice as well, so I appreciate it. For anyone else listening, there's a lot more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere else you get your podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also check out our learning center at intuji.com for a lot more great content. And yeah, thanks once again, Andreas. We'll keep in touch. And
Thank you, my pleasure. It was a blast. Yeah, we could chat for hours, I feel. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.